And then learning to recognize what might have not worked in the past and tied in with current technology and stuff like that. There might be a chance. But that's also, you know, when you're going to try something, try it on a scale you can afford to lose, but you want it at an impact level where you're not going to forget it if it didn't work.
Yeah.
And, you know, recognizing failure early enough is probably one of the biggest attributes we've had over the years, and, you know, learning to pivot quickly.
Yeah.
And don't get burned too hard, but a little singe ain't bad.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lawrence Steinlage, West Union, Iowa, which is in the far northeast corner of Iowa, about 45 minutes from where the deer tractors are built, if that helps logistics. But our farm in northeast Iowa is heavily, we're right in the heart of the corn belt, but we do corn, beans, wheat, rye, barley, buckwheat, do relay, companion, interseeding. But my real forte is I'm into the equipment manufacturing and that now, so I work with a lot of startup companies and that, and trying to help figure out the tools for tomorrow.
Tom Robinson from South Australia, so pretty well down the bottom, in the middle. Very Mediterranean climate, so 13 to 15 inch rainfall. Dad started doing no-till with a shank in the late 80s, early 1990s, and then we moved to a disc seeder in 2002, and then we purchased a stripper header in 2010. So we've been running that strip and disc system now for 15 years. We've been on controlled traffic for 15 years. We were high input farming for low rainfall, and then we went low input farming, and now we're doing what we call correct input farming, where we're doing a lot of sap testing. We're making our own trace elements, like dissolving our own trace elements, dissolving urea, and we've been mucking around with cover crops, multi-species, and then we graze some cattle as well. So we trade cattle, run stock of cattle, so grow a cover crop, pull a paddock out of grain production, and paddock that's say got too many weeds or it's got a problem in it, needs a biological boost, so we'll grow a mixed species cover crop, and then we'll go and buy some cattle and we'll rotational graze it.
We started no-till in early 80s. Our biggest challenge back then was we still heavy on the livestock side. We were a dairy farm, and that wasn't until we really started figuring out the cover crops and that we could learn to manage the manure with the cover crops and help us get full no-till. I mean, we did a period where we were strip tilling and stuff like that, and just learning to adapt the equipment has been the biggest challenge, and that's kind of led the doors to my sidelines now, where, like I said, I focus a lot on building the equipment to make it work better for our systems.
Yeah, so Dad started in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when Australia started that no-till revolution in Australia. That was with a shank seeder. It was a Gason shank seeder. And then Dad met Phil Needham in early 2000, and Phil Needham came over to Australia and said, you know, you really need to be getting into a disc seeder. So in Australia, if you run a disc seeder, a single disc seeder, we call that zero-till. And so that's when we started. We started zero-tilling in 2002 with a John Deere 1890. And we're still running that same drill today. So it's heavily modified, it's got a lot of weight on it for sowing into dry conditions. We typically sow 80 to 90% of our farm dry, you know, most years. This last year has been extremely dry. We had 5 inches of rain for the growing season and 6.5 for the year. And so we sowed 100% of our crop dry and waited 3 weeks for rain.
That would probably be the biggest difference between us. You're on the low end of the spectrum, we're more on the high end. I mean, on a normal year, we get 35 inches of precipitation, which is, metric would be 700 milliliters, I believe, give or take. But this year, we started out in a D4 drought. Then we had 35 to 40 inches of rain. Then we ended up back in a D2 drought. And then we had another 15 inches of rain. So pretty close to 55, 60 inches of moisture for the year. And you know, that a lot of people might find it hard to believe, but that's just the biggest challenge is drought, that sometimes it suffer Too much moisture is a little prettier. And
but disc seeder setup is the same message as whether it's dry or wet. You know, sharp discs.
Yes.
You know, cut your residue. You've got your pins and bushes are all good. Spoke closer wheels work just as good in the dry as they do in the wet. You know, and pressing that seed into the bottom of the slot. You know, the message is the same whether it's wet or dry, really, isn't it?
It's when it comes back to education, the biggest thing is learn the fundamentals. And, you know, well-maintained equipment's always going to outshine wore out, unneglected. And you know, one of the things we've really started to see work in our area is we're doing a lot of the relays and companion cropping and that. So we've got the excess moisture. You know, in our area, pattern tile is common. Everything's, you know, sub-drained. Well, ours was drained in the early 70s. What we've learned now is we built our water holding and infiltration to the point we've got excess water again. So instead of adding more drainage, what we've started looking at is how do I grow more out? You know, that's where I see the next frontier for us is learn how to stack more seasons of crops and stuff like that. And you know, we've done double crop. We're trying to get to where we're doing triple crop and stuff like that. To do the triple, ideally in our area, if the time allows, we'll start with a relay of cereal rye, soybeans, and then the day the cereal rye leaves the field, we'll actually be chasing the combine in standing crop with a drill, putting buckwheat in, and then we'll harvest the buckwheat and the soybeans together. And this is all in, I think we have on average, we have 135 days frost-free.
Oh.
So we're squeezing it in about as tight as we can. And you know, it's not every year that's going to work. You know, we can consistently do the relay crop and stuff like that, but the triple is, you know, we've got to have that cereal crop off of there by mid-July to get the buckwheat where it would actually mature. And you know, the future, we've tried several other companions or relays. Trying to figure out the right mix in our area is the challenge, and then you know, what do we do with the seed once you actually produce it? And you know, all our infrastructure in Iowa is set up for corn or beans.
For us, a cover crop has to really have a reason why we're doing it. And the only way we can make money off of our cover crops is to graze them. And we need to be able to graze them to obviously get that return on investment. So coming back to that low rainfall, for us, the key for us is 100% ground cover 100% of the time. And that's typically done with last year's residues. So stubble cover all the time. Even after planting or drilling a crop, we need that 100% ground cover all the time. But cover crop wise is what's best for the cattle and what's best for the soil as well. So we're growing spring crops over winter because that's when it rains, we don't get that cold, we don't have snow. So for us it's, you know, peas and oats and radish and a few other things. So our cover crops are very, very simple. When we do have a summer thunderstorm though, we can put some summer cover crops in. So we can put some corn and sorghum and millet. That's the best for the cattle grazing. And we normally chuck a bit of buckwheat and a few other things in it. There's lots of parameters. It's not as, we're not set and forget like a lot of these guys are in their high rainfall. You know, where a fellow was saying he's been growing annual ryegrass for 20 years and never had any issues and set and forget. Well, like ours is just purely opportunistic. If it rains, if we get lucky it gets rained, we try and use the moisture. Yeah.
Yeah, and not on the same regards, our biggest issue is the frost and freeze and all that stuff. You know, that limits our options quite a bit. You know, that's why early on we started interseeding in corn and stuff like that. So I think it was 2006 when we started dabbling with that, and then by 2012 we were doing every acre. But as we learned what we were doing, that's what led to the relay and companion. It's like anytime we can turn a cover crop into a cash crop, that's what helps pay the bills in our area. I mean, we're in a high rent district and that, so as much as I love covers, I want to, you know, I want the living root in the soil all the time, but I also want the cash flow.
We're the start of our season, it's, you know, hot and dry, and we're going into winter. So we're no chilling in hard, dry soils, still quite warm, and then we're going into winter, where you guys are coming out of winter.
Yep.
Cold, wet, coming out of winter, and warming up. So That's probably the two main differences.
Yeah, probably the biggest thing I learned when we came to Australia there is you guys have the heat to help alleviate compaction. We have the frost. And you know, the weird part for me to learn and understand was we're planting and harvesting the same time, and then that would mean our freeze thaw is the same time as your heat cycle. So it's learning them subtle little differences the challenge. But you know, far as the soil itself, well, if I took you to 6 to 7 inch rainfall area in here, there's probably not much different in the soils.
No.
And you know, we're higher carbon and all that, I would say, probably. So you're learning to manage that excess moisture is probably our biggest challenge, whereas you know, learning to manage the dryness is your challenge.
That's right.
Organic no-till, I mean, we've done enough learning how to stack the crops, and that is going to help. You know, using competition, and that is probably the easiest way to eliminate weeds. And you know, that's why I said my mindset is, you know, how can I start planting 2 to 3 different crops and keep cycling the plants and harvesting all the time. And you know, I keep idealizing what Colin Seiss has done in Australia, and how can I figure out how to do that in a full cropping system without livestock. You know, I don't have the livestock option. We're getting some livestock impact on acres, but nothing predictable yet.
Organic no-till is going to be very hard in Australia because we're basically planting on our first, we're drilling crops even before our first rain. So we have nothing to roll down. We have nothing to create that weed mat like what Rick Clark can do.
Yep.
So what we do is we try and, yes, we still use herbicides and chemicals and those things, but what we attempt to do is just try and lessen the effect. So if we're using glyphosate, we're putting it with fulvic acid, we're mixing it in with molasses, and we're using robust rates to kill weeds, but not over the top as well. So that's our biggest challenge is biomass. We don't have the excess water to be able to grow a large amount of biomass to get weed coverage. But the stripper straw does an amazing job. You know, the stubble cover, and you know, we've noticed it. We've got a weed reduction from stripper straw and ground cover and those things, but it's not perfect to be able to go and do organic no-till.
Yeah, I mean, probably the biggest thing we've learned over the years is the less disturbance, the less the weeds.
Yeah.
You know, so if even with row cleaners and stuff like that, if we start moving too much residue, I can guarantee you we're going to have weeds there. And then, you know, if you're placing fertility there at the same time, you're just going to accentuate the weeds with your cash crop and that. So learning to manage and stuff like that has probably been the biggest asset we've learned over the years. And, you know, trying to figure out what's next. You know, managing residue is just critical in our area is actually keeping residue around is the challenge. You know, our soils are so active right now. You know, I can take 300 bushel an acre corn and digest it by spring. It might look like it was whole plant harvested for silage. And that's even considering, you know, we freeze up in November and might be froze until 2 weeks before corn plant. But when you get that soil actually that active, it consumes a lot. And, you know, I've seen a lot of years, even under snow cover, we don't freeze. Well, I think, you know, right now in America here, there's a little panic with the financial situation and stuff like that. And usually the harder the times, the more people start learning new techniques and stuff like that. So, you know, guys, you know, even my in-laws, they're cutting back on tillage and stuff like that right now just because they're finally realizing it didn't pay for them in the first place. And, you know, I had one of those conversations today. You know, they're doing how much tillage, and they, in the end, they actually lost a bushel or two the acre, and it's just like.
So one thing about Australia is there's no yield crop insurance. So I always say there's no bad farmers in Australia because all the bad farmers are gone broke. You're either a good farmer or you're not a farmer at all. So the South Australian No-Till Farmers Association, I was on the board for 5 years and I was president for 2 of those. You know, South Australia is pretty well 95% no-till now. It's common practice because it has to be. because we're saving water. We have to save water through stubble retention, and there's reasonable amount of crop diversity. There is livestock integration as well on stubbles and grasslands. So yeah, it just comes back to that, because we are not propped up by yield insurance. You have to be a good farmer in Australia. It is that simple, and only the good farmers will survive.
Well, and in that same regards, I would say that's why majority of the corn farmers have a hard time learning how to no-till, because the bushel guarantee. They're not willing to take the yield hit that they might have if they don't learn how to do it right.
Yeah.
Now, we've proven over the years that we can maintain yield. Even first year no-till, we can match right up there bushel-wise, but it's that stigma. People got to be the first in the field to plant and stuff like that. When you start expanding acres, they want, to me, tillage mass management. But a lot of guys have a hard time understanding that they can create just as many problems at tillage as you can by sloughing off on no-till or something. The management on no-till. It's, as you said, and I've seen it firsthand, the best farmers in the world are in Australia. That's just been time. I mean, we never set off knowing exactly what we were doing. We were always doing what we thought was right. And, it's just learning to adapt as new ideals come along and implementing them. That's been the biggest thing I see a lot of times when we go to these conferences. You get the same guys asking the same questions year after year. It's like, well, what did you do with the last knowledge you earned and gained? You've got to actually take it home and implement it and see if it succeeds or fails. And I never actually went to a conference until 2016. Yeah. The only reason I went to the first conference was we were nominated for No-Till Innovator of the Year. And I figured I better show up and I better show up and see what this is all about. Yeah. And just always, that's why we get along so good. You're always thinking, how can you do better for yourself?
Yeah.
And sometimes you go to these events just to learn and reinforce what you thought might be right. Now, I guess that's probably the biggest thing I've seen.
Yeah. Well, it's frustrating because we, nearly 30 years of no-till, and really we haven't increased our organic matter that much. In Australia, it's very, very difficult to increase soil organic matter. Extremely easy to lose it, very, very hard to build it. But we are cycling, our soils are cycling really well now. There's always massive improvements. We've done a lot of deep end testing. We're getting plenty of N out of our soils now. We can back off on fertilizers and things like that. So yeah, are we better? After 30 years of no-till, absolutely. There's massive differences, but you just got to keep pushing. You got to come to these events and you listen and learn and.
Probably the hallways is the most education.
I was going to say the bar. I learn more at the bar than I do anywhere else, and I'd love catching up with these guys, and that's literally the only reason we're here at National No-Till is actually to catch up with the guys that we've met over here before, catch up, hear what they're thinking. A bit like the question you just asked. Where are we going to be in 5 or 10 or 15 years? Just keep pushing forward with new ideas.
It's them relationships is why I keep coming back. As I said earlier, I showed up first time in 2016. We had done a lot of cool stuff already, but then you start realizing iron sharpens iron. And I can go out all the classes in there, but it's these conversations like this is where the knowledge that's where the good, bad, and the ugly starts coming out. And that's why when we're out there talking, I don't care what. If we had a good year, you're going to hear about the good year. If we had the bad year, you're going to hear exactly what happened on the bad year. And the main reason I came to, or one of the goals I had with this conference, I wanted everybody to question everything. That's the take home I want everybody to have. Question me, question everybody.
Yeah.
And that's the only way you can improve yourself. And you have to be the one that decides, is that something that's worth bringing home to my farm? And how can I implement it the best of my ability? And you got to start trying one thing, and then you try another thing and another thing, and just keep on learning. That's how I got to where I'm at. And
well, really everything we've done on our farm is all stolen. You know, it's you know the stripper front. Well, the disc seeder was from Phil Needham. The stripper front was from Dwayne Beck. I rang Dwayne Beck in 2009 and had a chat with him on the phone, and yeah, that strip and disc system that he'd been working on, yeah, that sort of thing. You know, the dissolving of trace elements we've sort of really done ourselves as a low cost option to try and lower our cost of production. But yeah, for me, the key is the hallway, it's the bar, it's the dinners with people, it's catching up, learning what everyone's thinking, and then you go home and try something new. Well, that's the key, isn't it? To go home and actually do something.
You know, I'll go back to when I first started studying and reaching out and learning. You know, I went to the Mississippi Delta to learn how they alleviated compaction, and then I went to Minnesota, and you know, you start looking where I can grab this ideal, that ideal, and stuff like that. And you know, then you started down the cover crop route, and you know, the biggest thing I learned there is talk to the seed growers. You know, I just had that question in there. What's the best cover crop to use in Florida? I don't know, but I'll find you somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Turn around and here's Jill.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
There we go.
Yeah,
you know.
That's right.
And, you know,
yeah. Someone has already done what you're trying to do. They may or may not have got it to work, but they've tried. And if you know, sometimes hearing what didn't work is just as good as hearing what did work.
Yeah, and then learning to recognize what might have not worked in the past and tied in with current technology and stuff like that. There might be a chance. But that's all, you know, when you're going to try something, try it on a scale you can afford to lose, but you want it at an impact level where you're not going to forget it if it didn't work.
Yeah.
And, you know, recognizing failure early enough is probably one of the biggest attributes we've had over the years, and, you know, learning to pivot quickly.
Yeah.
And don't get burnt too hard, but a little singe ain't bad.
Yeah.
And
you got to fail.
Yeah.
You got to fail somewhere, and you got to fail. You know, at least got to have one little failure every year to see how hard you can push.